Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui. We have made it to March, and at the time that this episode comes out, more than 17% of 2025 is over, if you can believe it. And if you thought a lot has happened, this is the month where things really start rolling. And this is going to be a pretty wild mix of energy that we have coming up. Everyone online is going to blame it on eclipse season, but there's a ton of other stuff that we have going on at once. And that's why it's going to scramble some eggs. Because the Venus and Mercury retrogrades I talk about in this episode meet up with our first eclipse season of the year, which is notoriously when some big energy shifts happen, usually some significant world events and personal ones as well. So there's a lot happening, but I'm here to help you not only survive these retrogrades, but grab hold of them and come out the other side your best and baddest self yet. Today on the podcast, I dive into Venus and Mercury retrograde. Then stick around for my new workshop and what I've got cooking for Patreon sponsors. Venus stationed retrograde in the sign of Aries on March 1st. So we've been living with this energy for a little bit now. And it's going to continue to retrograde until it moves back into Pisces on March 27th. And then it'll station direct on April 12th. So this is a good long period of time that we're going to have this Venus retrograde energy. And if you're new here, this is a reminder that retrograde energy, regardless of what planet we're talking about, is not bad. It's not a curse. It's not the time when everything bad happens. And I always like to remind us of this because there is so much popular astrology online that treats pretty much anything that will get clicks and views, but especially retrogrades, because it's one of those astrology terms that has kind of filtered out into like the fairly mainstream non-astrological arena. So it's kind of taken on a life of its own there. And it doesn't have anything to do with the actual energy. And I think if we view it in a negative light, that's all we'll see. And so it is really important, I think, that we have our heads screwed on when we approach things like astrology, because we can end up using something that's a very helpful tool for a lot of people to live better, to live more consciously and in a more aligned way, and use that to do the exact opposite, to hold ourselves back, to limit ourselves, to clutch our pearls and withdraw from the world at certain periods of time. That's not what we want to do, because we lose out on the real meaning of retrograde energy, and it's actually damn useful. Now, from Earth's perspective, whenever a planet stations retrograde, it appears to be moving backwards in the sky. And so that, in a symbolic way, is very reflective of how retrograde energy actually manifests when a planet is involved. And so in the case of Venus being retrograde right now, this is a moment where we can kind of hit the brakes a little bit and review and feel into some things that are probably due for some reflection. The last time that we had a Venus retrograde was all the way back in 2023. So we don't get these every day. But look at this as a moment of emphasis and reflection on our resources, our values, our partnerships of all kinds, not just romantic, and how we commit ourselves and how we meet others in general. Those are the things that are up on deck. And on a collective level, we're also re-examining those same things. There has been a lot of discussion about how our resources and our finances can be used for more liberatory purposes and extend beyond ourselves, What are we trying to do with our purchases? And where is the money that we individually contribute to companies, to our government going? I think that the morality aspect of those things is going to come to the forefront over this Venus retrograde. And we may see instances over the next few weeks that remind us of some of the events of the first Trump presidency. Because the last time that Venus was retrograde in the sign of Aries was actually 2017, which was the first year of the first Trump presidency. So unfortunately, some of those bells are going to be ringing. And some of the things that top of mind I'm thinking about over the course of this period of time, I'm looking at the people of Gaza and Sudan that are being starved. They're being denied necessary resources. I'm also looking at some of the people who have lost their jobs due to the actions of the Trump administration. I am also wondering if perhaps some of those people might even get their jobs back because of some of the legal decisions that are coming down about illegal firings that are happening within the government. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be everybody, but I would like to see some people, regain their employment for necessary work that keeps this country and, some of these systems that have a worldwide impact going. Something interesting I found while doing research on the last Venus retrograde in Aries in 2017 was an executive order that Trump signed pretty early on in his presidency. This is Executive Order 13781. And this was about improving the efficiency of the executive branch and directing the director of the Office of Management and Budget to reorganize government functions and eliminate unnecessary agencies. And so this I found completely fascinating given what we're dealing with Elon Musk and the whole Doge apparatus that they've instituted to do exactly what this is. So this is a continuation of work that was started in Trump's first presidency. And of course, all of this shit, the Project 2025 stuff, has been decades in the making. I really don't want us to forget that. But some of those bells, like I was saying, from Trump's first presidency are being rung right now. But I think given the environment that we're in, it's not 2017. A lot has changed. People are a lot more aware of what's happening and how dramatic this impact is going to be, because you start cutting strings and they clearly don't know all of the strings that they're cutting and the impact they're going to have, and nor do they care. I actually would describe what's happening right now as a smash and grab. I think there is obviously an effort to take an axe to the federal government, which we know that conservatives really like. They have wanted this because they think this is the solution to a lot of the problems that they have. And not understanding that a lot of people, including themselves, rely on these services and rely on these departments in ways that may be invisible to them, but are certainly very real, very tangible. So I think that people's awareness of that is going to increase over this Venus retrograde. We have some pretty scary stuff coming down the pike with Social Security and Medicare. And so my hope for this time of reflection and revision, a lot of people are going to actually start doing something about it, and it's great to hold up signs. I really think that what the Tesla takedown project is doing has a direct impact, right? Because the goal is to hit Elon Musk where it hurts financially. And I'm loving that I'm seeing so many people talking about being more responsible with where they put their money and what they invested in, what companies they give it over to, what the government is doing with our tax dollars. Because we need to be very strategic about that. And given that money is really the language that oligarchs speak, I think that that's a great starting point for us. So I do foresee a continuation and growth of existing protests. I do think that boycott movements and redirecting our money on a longer term basis, like I think a one day, we're not going to spend money at a certain place, it's a nice step in the right direction. I don't think that it is the solution that we need, but we need to start thinking more long term. And so a lot of that work can be done over this Venus retrograde, the strategizing, the refocusing on what is actually important and of value to us individually and collectively. And so This is another moment where if you have been delayed on getting involved, building community, make some of those connections. And if you're in a place where you're like, I'm maybe not doing the thing that is right for me, change it up. Make some moves, try other things out. Because when we do the things that feel right for us, we're going to find that we're going to be able to manifest a reality that is closer to what we want, and not what somebody else wants or somebody else thinks is right or what they think we should be doing, but what feels right for us. Because we all have different interests and skills. And I think that instead of trying to force yourself to be someone else and do something that maybe someone else would be better suited to do, focusing on our strengths and what we feel most passionate about is going to bring us the best results. And I think that that is the underlying message of this Venus retrograde. Now, on a personal, individual level, this Venus retrograde is a great time for rebranding or revisiting your creativity and artistic projects, reconnecting with your creativity if that is something that you're interested in or maybe has fallen down the priority list with life. We can get back to that, getting clear about what we want and what we value about ourselves. You can think of this Venus retrograde as a cosmic tune-up so that we can get closer to ourselves and what we want personally and collectively. So we might be thinking more about how we present ourselves to the world. Not so much because it's important that other people like us or agree with how we come across, but to be bold and honest about who we are, which is something that I'm seeing a lot among transgender people in this country, because obviously they have been very much under attack by our government, by groups of people within this country that think that they should not exist. And rather than shrinking away from who they are, a lot of trans people are being more trans than ever. They are stepping up. They are saying, we're here, this is who we are, and we're not going to back down. They're also fighting for transgender children to receive healthcare that is life-saving, because that is also being denied. And so that's a really great example about how presenting ourselves to the world can have a larger impact. Because some people might argue that this is a time for people to go back in the closet. And I think that where we're at in this fascist country, and it's been fascist the whole time, guys, I'm sorry to say, but it's getting more fascist. And so to get people back in the closet would be to comply with fascism, would be to make it easier for them and make it harder for people to be themselves in general. So I have a lot of admiration for people who are trans, who are continuing to live proudly and openly as trans people, because I think that is vital to us moving forward and also protecting trans people. We don't want to just be protecting people that are theoretical and in the closet or speaking for those people, because those people have their own voices and should be able to use them. But, something as seemingly simple that a lot of us cisgender people take for granted, just like showing up as ourselves to the best of our ability in the world, can actually be a larger statement. So think about that. Think about how you are coming across to other people. What is the presence that you have, the way that you dress yourself, the way that you appear in the world? What impact is that having? What story is that telling to people? And is it aligned with what you want for the future? This is also a time where we're thinking more about how we come alongside others in commitment. And we have all kinds of commitments with people. We have commitments with people that we work with. We have commitments with people that we are in personal relationships with. We have all kinds of agreements that we enter into formally or informally. We're going to show up for each other. We're going to be there for each other. Or I'm literally contracted to do a certain job, right? Those are commitments that we make. So we might be reevaluating some of those things. Are they right for us? Are they feeding us on an individual level? Are they fair to us and the other party? Because this is a moment where we might be seeing the larger impact of inequity in general. And so when we have inequities in our personal lives and we zoom out and we look at our culture on a collective level, it's easier to accept social inequities when we accept a lot of inequities interpersonally. And when we think about our agreements and our partnerships, it is always important to remember that we can only control ourselves. We can only control our side of the agreement. And so if, let's say, the other person is not interested in even, discussing the agreement or reevaluating whatever our relationship agreement is, then maybe that is not somebody that is actually meeting us in partnership. And maybe it's time to reevaluate if that person really is adding value to your life. And this is not to say that we should be like discarding people willy-nilly. I think that's also something that is negatively contributing to the culture that we're in at this moment. But somebody doesn't have to be, thrown in jail or humiliated and dragged on the internet just because you don't want to be in partnership with them anymore. They can still be, somebody that that you have a decent relationship with. Or maybe they're just somebody that you don't like to interact with too closely. That's okay. And I think that evaluating what it means to end partnerships and what that can look like can also very much be a part of this energy. We don't have to go to war with somebody just because they're not right for us or they didn't do things in the way that we liked, and vice versa. But we can only control our part of that equation. So what we really want to do is make sure the things that we do are aligned with who we are at our core and what we intend to do, what we want. But we have to remember we can't control the reception, nor should we. Because if we have allies or people that like what we do and how we do it, and we want to work closely with them, that's great. But that means that those people should be coming willingly, right? They're bringing something to the table, as are we. So if we are not living authentically, if we're not presenting ourselves as true to who we are, we might find that we're attracting the wrong people because we're attracting something to us that's not really in alignment for us. It's not reflective of who we are. So if we put up, this false image of maybe who we want to be or we think we should be, we're going to find that maybe a lot of the relationships that we bring into our lives, they're going to be attracted to the wrong thing. So there's going to be some tension and probably some disappointments there. But if we are presenting ourselves authentically, if we're living in an authentic way, we're naturally going to attract people that like what we have going on. And so we need to think more in those terms rather than like, how can I make this person be what I want them to be? Or how can I make them fit into my situation, right? We don't want to make people, including ourselves, fit into boxes. It's better to be in a more aligned space, let people that are aligned with that find you, because we have a tendency to waste a lot of our resources, time, energy, money, wishing that other people would get with our program, that they would see what we see, want what we want, value what we value. But none of that is within our reach. So what we end up doing is denying ourselves the things that are really aligned by not channeling the energy that we use trying to make other people be a certain way for us back into ourselves. And our relationships with others are incredibly important. They have a huge impact on our lives. But the strongest relationship that we're capable of having is with ourselves. And that makes us better suited to all of our relationships. Because when we know who we are and what we stand for, it becomes a lot easier to see when certain partnerships in our life aren't quite right for us. It allows us to draw appropriate boundaries for ourselves and build connections in a more honest and healthy way, which means that the foundations are a lot stronger, and we need stronger foundations for where we're going. We don't define ourselves by what other people want and need, and we can be real about our side of things to figure out how we can interact with others in a way that's mutually beneficial. And not just one person calling the shots and then another person going along with it, which is very normalized in our culture, and it's very unhealthy. Because if we're not living authentically, we're not attracting what's aligned. We could actually be pushing it away instead. And so this is a time to consider, what have you been attracting? And is there a way you can play some different notes in your life and see what else you can attract when you get very clear about who you are and what you want and what kinds of relationships are right for you. You also want to re-examine your relationship with your morality during this time, because that is a part of who we are. Are you moving through the world in ways that are directed at manifesting a more liberated future? I'm assuming that's what you want if you're listening to my podcast, because we know that if others are not free, you are not free. And if you're paying attention right now, that is something that you're very aware of. There's a popular quote by Martin Niemöller that has been making the rounds right now for good reason. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. They are coming. They have been coming for immigrants. We have been locking people up more than any other country for a long time now. And so we've accepted this culturally, socially, by and large, as a country. And so we're kind of behind, collectively right now. And so it's worth considering, what is worth being brave for when you have skin in the game, because we all have skin in the game. What's worth standing up and taking a risk for? Is the way that you're living, where you're directing your resources, time, money, energy, your data, your attention, to causes and projects that are building the world that you want to see. We have to take hold of every inch of our resources and make it all count. So this is an important moment to really take stock and get in alignment. And we also have the Mercury retrograde starting also in Aries, which is going to help us accomplish some of this work too. Mercury will station retrograde March 14th at 11:46 p.m. Pacific time. So if you are on the East Coast or in a different part of the world, maybe March 15th. And that'll be at 9 degrees of Aries. And then it'll retrograde back into Pisces on March 29th, and then it'll station direct in Pisces on April 7th at 4:07 a.m. Pacific time. And Mercury represents our mind, our thought processes, our communication, and it's also certain types of transportation. So those things will be highlighted during this Mercury retrograde. Now, Mercury is currently in Aries, so we might be feeling a certain urgency about the things that we want to get done or the things that we want to do. We might be pursuing new work or thinking about new approaches to the work that we do, or daily routines, might be new projects. It's kind of a get up and go type of energy. But as much as you may feel like you're in a hurry, you are going to want to take the time to connect and decide what truly feels right and what's worth investing your energy in. If something sounds good and then an hour later that excitement is gone, maybe it was just a reminder that you can do new things. You can have new ideas. It's a nice reminder because a lot of us get settled into our habits and what's familiar, and we don't have to be. So when Mercury stations retrograde, we might be rethinking some of those habits and some of the ways that we approach things. And are they for us? Are they in alignment? Are they a priority in this particular moment? Every Mercury retrograde is a time where the universe hits the brakes a little bit. And because this Mercury retrograde starts in Aries, I think it's going to be a bit frustrating because Aries energy doesn't really like to be delayed. It doesn't like to be told no. It just wants to proceed and kind of see what happens. But part of the lesson of this Mercury retrograde is sometimes slowing down is the best way to speed up. And so this is a moment where we can learn a lot about ourselves if we're paying attention to the experiences that we're having. Because if you're excited, if you're passionate about an idea, and whatever it is feels aligned, you should listen to that. And it may not be the moment to get things started. If it's a brand new thing that you want to do, it may be more the time to do your research, to do your prep work. And since we have a little bit of time before this retrograde actually starts, if there are things that you're feeling drawn to right now that are new, given that Mercury is in Aries, I would say get that stuff started before that retrograde, because we really might feel like charging ahead. And Mercury retrograde is really not the time for the new thing. It's more about refocusing the things that are kind of already on your plate. And so the things that you're most passionate about, getting those details just right. Because honestly, we don't have a lot of time. And what that means is we don't have a lot of time to waste, my friends. The world is changing. Things are moving fast, and the universe is saying that there's no time to waste on a bunch of bullshit or spinning your wheels. So it's time to get real, get detailed, so that the things that do matter to you, you have a better shot at tackling and really getting them right. And as Mercury retrogrades back into Pisces on March 29th, this is also going to bring up some of the things that we were thinking about and addressing over the course of Mercury in Pisces, which was not too long ago. And so, again, editing, reviewing, revising, but also this may be taking some of the things that we're thinking about during the Aries part of the retrograde and making them a little bit broader, a little bit more universal in terms of their potential impact. But we get to start with ourselves, and not because we're the most important person in the universe or we're better than other people or whatever. It's more that we can only control ourselves. So we must start with ourselves. And once we get a handle on where we're at, what we want, and where we want to go next, then we can kind of zoom out and think more about the collective impact, because our ideas don't happen in a vacuum. We share this planet with all kinds of living beings and all kinds of natural resources. So it is about more than just us. Some of the things to be prepared for Mercury retrograde. If you have a vehicle that you rely on and it needs an oil change or some other work that you might have been putting off, I would see to that before the retrograde, because it might force your hand if you haven't dealt with it. And another thing is, if you are somebody that drives or you're a pedestrian, I would be very aware of your surroundings. Be on your defensive driving, be on your defensive pedestrianing, because I think that this is a moment where we could see some pretty gnarly accidents, excuse my California terminology. If you have ongoing work projects or creative projects and you're facing some kind of deadline, I would just make sure that you don't leave those things to the last minute. One of the things that people notoriously hate about Mercury retrogrades is that it is just a great time for, the computer to go haywire or to forget to save something that you're working on. So you just want to leave extra time and extra room for things that are important or maybe on a deadline. In terms of communications, double check those emails, check for typos, things like that. When you are speaking to people, make sure that you kind of consider how it might be received before you press send, or you just blabber something out that maybe you don't mean. And, give people some grace if you can for the things that they say and do that might be mistakes or might just kind of come out the wrong way. And give yourself that grace too, because, this is just the time to just put your foot in your mouth. So if you don't have to do it, don't do it. And if it does happen, you're a human being, and so is the other person or people that you're dealing with. So we got to just try to focus on our humanity, our individuality. We approach things in different ways, we speak in different ways. And sometimes that means that we don't quite get each other. We just kind of miss each other for some reason. And so we are in a moment in the world where we're learning that we have a planet full of individuals that need to work together. And so this is a time to practice this skill of we are all different. We don't all think the same way. And, there can be radical possibilities with accepting that and giving each other a little bit more room to be human. I mentioned eclipse season at the beginning of this podcast because not only are we going to be navigating these retrogrades, but eclipse season starts on March 13th with a total lunar eclipse in the sign of Virgo. And there's a lot to that. So instead of opening that can of worms on this episode, I am going to do a special eclipse season episode for the sponsors of this podcast over on Patreon. If you're interested in that, other bonus episodes, and more that I make, the link to join us is in the show notes. You can also join for free to get updates, access to the Petty Astrology chat community, and other goodies too. Before we go, I want to let you know that registration for my new workshop is now open, and I'm very excited about it. It's called The Creative's Way, an astrological journey. And this is a 6-week exploration of our creativity using my unique take on Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way. And I'm so excited to offer this because I truly believe that every human being is creative in their own way. So this whole thing is about reconnecting with that, going deeper and learning how to use your astrology to help you become the most creatively empowered version of yourself you can be. And the energy right now is really perfect for this workshop. It starts in late April and we're going through May. And in my opinion, this is the year of the artist. So there's never been a better time to just jump in with both feet, break down those blocks, and explore the liberating power of your creativity. Given the time that we're living in, I know finances are tight for a lot of people, so I did my best to make this as affordable as possible. And if you are somebody who is low income, I also have 2 scholarship spots for this workshop that you can apply for. If you just click on the link, scroll all the way to the bottom, there's an application there. And if you are somebody that has extra money to spare and you would like to sponsor some more scholarship spots, all that information is there as well. I know this workshop is going to be an amazing experience and it's going to bring a lot of very cool, very interesting people together. So I'm really looking forward to it and I hope to see you there. That's it for this week's episode. Tune in on Patreon for even more Petty Astrology. This episode was written, edited, and produced by me, Kaycee Felton-Lui. Our podcast art is by Max Swanson. Our show music is by Paul Schneider. And the score in the middle of the episode is by Relaxing Time. This episode was made possible by my sponsors over on Patreon.